Welcome to Total Apex Sports. I'm Andrew with our guests Cody and Zach for Total Apex Sports on the fourth and goal. Lawson might be here shortly, but first we have to cover what this. It might be ugly, it might not be, but at least weather-wise it will. AFC North clash between the Steelers at Browns. Zach, you can go ahead on your thoughts on this game.
Well, one thing I have learned is that as good as the Steeler team is, and they are good, and I am not taking back the contender thing that I said a little bit ago, but it seems like if the Steelers go up against a team and that team is really bad at one thing, we are not going to be able to be good at that one thing. I don't know what
Mhm.
it is. We went against the Ravens, who have a terrible pass defense. We could not get the pass defense going. We've got up against teams with leaky run defenses. We've struggled against the run. We're still winning, but I want us to go into Cleveland, and I apologize to my dad. He's a huge Browns fan. Sorry, Wayne. We need to go in and play the Browns like they're the Browns. We need to demolish them going away and just put to bed any of this 3-day rest kind of thing. This should not be a challenge. They should. I don't care about the weather. This should not be a challenge.
Yeah.
Well, that's exactly why it is probably going to be. And it's like all I've heard today is about, oh, Jameis Winston's hands are too small. His measurables at the combine, he had too small a hands. So when it's cold weather, small hands don't grip the football very well. I don't know how much I'm going to buy into that. All right. Jameis Winston has at least made the Browns offense watchable in the past 3-4 weeks. And he's been delivering the football. And it's whether it's Elijah Moore, Cedric Tillman, Jerry Jeudy, he's been delivering the football. David Njoku's getting involved. So, I mean, yeah, he's probably going to throw a pick tonight. And both teams might struggle a little bit in the gale force winds and 40-degree temps and maybe a little rain. But man, I'm not going to buy that it's going to be a total Pittsburgh blowout, especially after the offense kind of laid an egg against the Ravens last week in a win off of 6 field goals from Boswell. So I think it'll be a fun, classic NFC North matchup tonight. Or not NFC North, NFC East.
AFC North.
AFC North. There we go.
Yeah.
It's been AFC Central. It's been a lot of things, so it's okay.
Yeah.
We've changed a lot.
The teeth, the lips, the tip of the tongue.
It is going to be interesting. You know, the Browns haven't really gotten the run game going ever since Chubb got back. But you know, this is you know, he got injured during the Steelers game last year, if I'm correct.
Yeah. It was a nasty
So
one.
yeah, so it's going to be well, this time it's going to be in Cleveland, so it's going to be interesting if they can get that going. And you know, we got our fellow writer Jordan. They're gonna let Russ cook in the freezing cold. I mean, like it's gonna be interesting, like how like pass heavy or like how willing Russ is gonna want to throw those fade balls to like Pickens and Mike Williams this week. But
It depends. That wind is going to be nasty. There's a gale force wind warning in place from like an hour before the game starts until Friday morning. And those moon balls could get picked up and thrown out of the stadium if he throw. So I don't want Russ. I appreciate what the comment said, but I don't want Russ to cook. I don't. We have really bad edge blocking. This should be, hey, look, we're handing to Najee. Hey, look, we're handing to Najee. What should we do? Let's hand to Najee again. And that should be what we do. Because that's how we win this game.
It's not going to get any easier. It's like Russell Wilson had his chance last week against the worst defense in the league, and he couldn't get it together. They were kept out of the end zone, and all he basically did was throw the ball to George Pickens, who had a pretty decent fantasy game. But other than that, Russell didn't do anything.
That's where I'm hoping Justin Fields comes in, because I brought up on our other podcast that I don't believe that that anyone's worried about the preparation Justin Fields has. They rolled out those 2 plays because they were fully ready and just wanted to see how it worked, and they really like that. I think the second they get near or in the red zone, Justin Fields comes in, because Russell Wilson is, I think if he's not the worst, he's among the worst quarterbacks in the red zone in the NFL this year. I appreciate Chris Boswell. I love Chris Boswell. He's the best kicker in the NFL, not just this year, but one of the historically best ones. I don't want to rely on him like we've been doing. Like I said before we got in the air, he can kick 15 and make all 15 from over 50, but the Steelers need to see more of that because we're going to go up against the Eagles. If we go into the playoffs, we're going to see the Bills. We're going to see teams who we're going to have to actually outscore, and we can't do that right now with this.
Yeah. We can go on to talking about the Sunday Night Football and Monday Night Football game this week. We have like 6 teams on bye. But on Sunday night, we have the Eagles going to Los Angeles against the Rams. That's going to be a fun game, I think. I think Philly's really going to showcase, like kind of like what they did like last Thursday. Even though the Rams defense has been pretty feisty the past few weeks, I think the Eagles are just going to go back on top with their resurging defense. What are your thoughts on that game, Cody?
Yeah, I mean, I think it has the makings of a fun one, and I hope that the Eagles' offense can kind of just liven things up a little bit. They've been so fortunate to have Saquon Barkley as their running back, and he has literally just been carrying that offense one chug at a time. And it's just been fading and fading and fading the fantasy value of A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. I just wrote an article about this. So the Eagles have run 630 plays on offense this year, and 364 of those plays, which is about 58%, have been rushing plays. And especially over the past 3 weeks, they have just been like running the football, and there's just been no targets. I think Devontae Smith is averaging just over 3 targets a game in the past 3 weeks. Like, what are fantasy managers supposed to do with that? So I'm hoping a little shift of coast from right to left coast, and then a little bit of that Hollywood Tinseltown fever gets into them, and they want to put on a little bit of a show because I need a big game out of A.J. Brown tonight.
Yeah.
That's a great point about Saquon. Because I don't understand. I'm not an offensive coordinator. I'm not an expert. I'm not up there. But you would think that you have someone like Saquon Barkley or Derrick Henry or someone like that. You have a chart right next to you, and every time you give them the ball, you mark it and you look up. And if there's not enough on there, you give more. Derrick Henry was given the ball 13 times in the loss against that. Saquon Barkley needs to be fed and fed all the time. I agree that he is the key to it. And if you get Saquon Barkley going, that's more likely you'll get the other guys going in a play action or something like that. But yeah, the Eagles say if all the Steelers have to do when we face them is take down Saquon Barkley, we don't have to worry about the rest of them. I'll feel a little better.
Yeah, we talked about this yesterday with Brandon. I just thought like for whatever reason like the Eagles just start off slow, like they just don't get going till the second half of games for whatever reason. But yeah, this game at least I think the Rams they might be definitely more conscious of trying to stop. So that might leave things open up for AJ Brown and Devonta Smith potentially if he's active. In terms of the Ravens Chargers on Monday night, I actually am pretty confident in this game, surprisingly. Like, this is like the type of primetime spot that I remember like last year and a few other previous years, like they usually like go if they have a rough game one week that in a primetime spot, they usually come out and they're prepared for this type of matchup. I think like the last time they played the Chargers, they were pretty solid. Obviously, it's a completely different unit with Jim Harbaugh. Like their defense, other than getting torched by Cincinnati, I mean, they've been really solid just overall. So it'll probably be a fun. I think both games are going to be fun, like more high scoring potentially, back and forth. What are your thoughts on this? The Chargers, Cody?
Yeah, what a fun time to be an LA sports fan. You get back-to-back night games, Sunday night, Monday night. That'd be cool for anyone who could to double up on that. But hey, I think it's going to be a show as well. I think it's going to be a fantasy-rich environment that night. And one of my plays of the week is Quentin Johnston going up against that Ravens secondary. He's been steadily getting more and more targets, and he's averaging the 20th most fantasy points in the league this year, ahead of guys like CeeDee Lamb and Garrett Wilson, right? So he's coming around at the right time. He's kind of fixing the dropsies a little bit. He still struggles with those drop balls a little bit, but man, the big thing that is just crazy about his quarterback, ever so quietly, Justin Herbert has had one of the most remarkable starts to his career of any quarterback in the NFL ever. And his comp right now is Peyton Manning. Through this stage in his career, he is either equivalent to or better than Peyton Manning through this many games in his career. That's mind-blowing. And so give me that statistic to carry him against a poor passing defense, and let's start all those Chargers pass catchers on Monday night.
We need to be on around the horn, because you would have gotten like so many points with those great stats. Goodness gracious, you made my heart happy with that, Cody. Some great stats there.
Yeah.
Goodness, because I like this is not Russell Wilson. This is not the Steelers' weird collection of people catching passes on George Pickens. This is Justin Herbert, and Justin Herbert should be able to eviscerate. No offense, Andrew, eviscerate this Ravens secondary. The question is, and I want to know for both. I'm curious, how is the Ravens run defense gonna do? Because the Ravens run defense was kind of embarrassed by over 100 yards between Warren and Harris last week. Do they shut down the Chargers, and can a one-dimensional Chargers pass defense beat the Ravens?
Yeah, I think one underrated thing from the Bengals Chargers game was actually they utilized Herbert on the ground like a lot more than I would have thought potentially, potentially based on like the past few weeks. But that actually helped set up Dobbins with that last minute touchdown to ice the game. So yeah, it's going to be kind of interesting, because I won't be surprised. Both teams try to establish the run to begin the game, but then it might just turn out to be a shootout at the end, just to catch up on points. Because yeah, it's going to be interesting, because also Roquan's dealing with that hamstring that from the Steelers game, so it might be Hamilton being the captain of the defense. So that might be a little not the best for the Ravens run defense for sure. But the one good thing out of their loss with their pass defense, with Trey White and Marlon Humphrey had 5 picks on the year. At this point, I don't know why they're still starting Brandon Stevens. Like, I think he's been struggling all year. But yeah, both games are going to be a fun back and forth.
Yeah, and just to clear up one stat I said earlier. So it's the past 3 weeks where Quentin Johnston, he's averaging the 20th most fantasy points per game in PPR format. So he's averaging just over 15 fantasy points a game, and that's ahead of guys like Garrett Wilson and stuff like that. But I did want to ask you guys, especially you, Andrew. So in last week's game, Ravens against the Steelers, George Pickens still had a nice day out wide, right? And so that's one of the reasons I love Quentin Johnston this week, is because the Steelers slot receivers, Calvin Austin and whoever was lining up out there, they didn't do anything. And so Russell Wilson was just kind of one-dimensional, but he just kept finding Pickens. So is the Ravens defense a little bit more stout, Andrew, against the slot? And could we expect a down game from Ladd McConkey and maybe an up game from Quentin Johnston?
That is interesting. Just because they did try, like, Pickens had a good stat line, but I think they had like 2 or 3 more end zone looks from what I remember. At least 2. He had 2 more looks on a fade, like one-on-one. So I don't know. It's gonna be interesting because they do move Ladd around, and they use him as the motion guy, and that's what helped them win the game against the Bengals when that huge crossing route to Ladd from Herbert. I think it's just more of I don't know if it's like they're stronger against slot guys. I think it's just like the opportunity for the outside is there more times than not, and normally the best receivers wind up outside, so they just end up finding that guy as their first target read. I think that's what it is. But I wouldn't be surprised if Ladd does have a down game, just because he's kind of rolling off of like big plays and touchdowns. So yeah, Johnston could have a pretty nice game.
Now, every single year there's a team that I have to keep checking the standings to remind myself that they're among the top, and the Chargers are that team for me this year. Every time
Yeah.
I write or so I have to do something, I recheck. I'm like, they're not that bad. And I look and I have to. It's a So the Chargers are one of those teams that I think they're enjoying flying under the radar a bit, because they're one of those teams that I would not want to play the Chargers in the playoffs. I would
I
not
think the
want to play the Chargers
Steelers
in
are
the playoffs.
destined for a clash. I just feel it coming in the playoffs. I just feel like the Chargers are going to sneak in there in the wild card, because KC is going to run away with that division, and Pittsburgh's probably going to win this division. And I just feel like they're destined for this little AFC clash, and I'm going to be fearful of playing the Chargers in the playoffs if they stay healthy.
Yep. That's a dangerous team. There's the matchup. If that happens, it'll all be about how terribly the Steelers match up with them.
Yeah. What Jordan said, the Eagles' offense is inconsistent, but their defense will hold down the Rams. The Sharks could have a good game, but yeah. So I think it's going to be interesting how the Ravens' offense bounces back, because I feel like they do play up to their opponents more. I will. Well, other than like, I don't know, I would say the Steelers and Chiefs, they just that's like the one outlier, those two outlier type teams. But in terms of like the Chargers, based on like historically, they're normally pretty good against them, and in prime time as well. Before we move on, Sam had a question about there's all the bye weeks. He needs 2 running backs and one in the flex. Kareem Hunt, Bucky, Rico, and Hawkinson. So, and he has on a tight end. So he's wondering if he should go double tight end, or just plug in the 3 running backs. What do you think, Cody?
Yeah, Kareem Hunt is one of my starts of the week, and I know I'm going to get pushback on it because Isaiah Pacheco is coming off of injured reserve. But the Chiefs are playing on Thanksgiving next Thursday, and it's a division game against their hated rival, the Raiders. And there is no need for the Chiefs to play Isaiah Pacheco in this game. So I think Isaiah Pacheco is either going to be a healthy scratch or very minimally involved, and this is going to be one of the last cream of the crop Kareem Hunt games you're going to get against a very poor, I think is the worst run defense in the league. So Kareem for me is a smash. And then I've been kind of wanting Dowdle to do something, but man, he's proven me wrong week in and week out. So I'm going to go Kareem Hunt, Bucky coming off a bye. I think his leg's finally healthy. And then I would roll Hawkinson over Otten.
Oh, well, I think he's starting on. I think he wondered if he should roll out Dowdle or Hawkinson in like the flex. So like he would have 2 tight ends.
Yeah, I'd probably roll Hawkinson
that
over
2 tight end
Dowdle.
I'm hesitant on. Okay. I don't know why. The second I see 2 tight ends, I get really hesitant. I'm like, unless you guys are guaranteed to, that's I would go three running backs, but this particular year is it's an off year fantasy wise, so I'm not really sure. If you hear me say, you might want to do the opposite.
Last year
3 running backs.
Rico Dowdle. So I'm looking at the data right now. So Rico Dowdle over the last 3 weeks is averaging 11.9 fantasy points per game in PPR. I think he made a lot of that a couple of weeks ago, but Hawkinson, he's kind of been quiet since coming back from injury, but what about a get right game against a division opponent in the Bears? And, the Bears, they give up some points to the tight end. So I'm going on a touchdown hopeful for Hawkinson there.
Yeah, I got in my own home league, I kind of should have went the double tight end. I have Njoku, but Taysom Hill went off on my bench, so I got burned by that. But yeah, I would say Rico against the Commanders. Yeah, that's kind of, I guess it's more of like ceiling versus floor, for that one, for sure. But yeah, we can
Yeah, I
go
guess
on
it
to
depends
the
on your league situation because like Dowdle, I mean the Cowboys offense, they're just like they're getting decimated in time of possession. So they're like 27th or 28th in
yeah
the league in time of possession. So their offense is just on the shelf. So if you need floor, or if you want to shoot for ceiling, that's kind of the question there to help decide.
yeah.
That's a good point.
The games to watch for this week, I think the main one's going to be the Niners Packers NFC Championship
Mhm.
rematch. I think the Packers could easily, maybe not easily, but they could. I wouldn't be surprised if they got their revenge this week against the Niners, who have kind of been on a downturn. I know Kittle's probably going to come back, but Debo's not fully healthy. McCaffrey, he's been okay, but he hasn't had that boom game yet. Coming off of injury. What do you guys think about this game, Cody?
Yeah, I don't know. I think the Packers were lucky to squeak one out last week against the
Okay.
Bears. It's kind of looking like it could be a tight one. I really want to say that Juwan Jennings is going to have a stellar game again, like he did last week. But that Packers pass defense, I think, is just a little bit more stout than the Seattle Seahawks pass defense. So I don't know. I think you still got to roll with Jennings in this game. You might temper expectations. So the big thing is which running back is going to be more productive, Josh Jacobs versus Christian McCaffrey, especially because it's supposed to snow at Lambeau in this game. So it could
Oh
be a
yeah,
heavy ground game. So you might want to fade pass catchers in this game and keep an eye on the weather.
yeah, for sure. Zach, what do you think about this?
This th- this is a weird 49ers team this year, and I think the 49ers made a lot of enemies over the last few years who, now that there's some dents in the armor and the ability to take them down, they're really excited about the chance to get back at them. And this is a perfect time for the Packers to put a really, really heavy blow on what the 49ers are trying to do this season. So I really like the Packers because do not discount that emotional oomph going into this kind of football game, especially if it snows in Lambeau. You have a snowy Lambeau
Yeah,
game with all this. Yeah, absolutely. I take the Packers in a heartbeat. It's not the same
yeah,
49ers. It just isn't from so many different perspectives. And on paper, it blows my mind. On paper, you look at it and it should be a contending team, and they're struggling to keep their heads above water.
right. I think the only other, because Chiefs are gonna whack the Panthers. Like, if the Panthers actually upset the Chiefs, that would be like the biggest storyline coming out of this week.
If there was
The only
ever a year
non,
for it to happen, it's this Chiefs. Just saying.
yeah, it is interesting like what happened to their defense, because that's been like a huge strength for them over the years. But I don't think it's anything fundamentally they're doing wrong. They're just getting a little bit out schemed by some of the better offenses. And Bo Nix, obviously the week prior to last week, played his best game, I would say. Um, the only non-division game that's interesting is the Lions traveling to Indianapolis. Now with Anthony Richardson back, um, are we going to see another like Lions Jags game like last week, or do you see this more of like a back and forth, Cody?
Yeah, I think this could be a back and forth a little bit. The Lions are pretty stout against the run. They're the fifth ranked run defense in the league, but you can throw on this football team. And so if Anthony Richardson throws the ball, like he did last week against a really quality New York Jets secondary, I mean, it wasn't a big leg game for Anthony Richardson. A couple rushing
Yeah,
touchdowns helped. But I mean, he was hitting receivers in stride, and he threw a couple guys open. I watched it. It was crazy. It's like a different player. And so I had Richardson as one of my fades last week, and I will own it, man. I was dead wrong. He had a great game for
Yeah,
fantasy.
a lot of people did.
Yeah, and I mean, he looked like a different dude. And okay, granted, it was against the Jets, but that's still a really quality defense, especially the secondary. So I'm actually moving him up in my rankings this week. I like Richardson a lot in this game. I think the Lions are going to be victorious, but I think they're going to throw, and they're going to throw heavy against this Lions team. So get your pass catchers out there for the Colts, and hope that Anthony Richardson can repeat the performance from last week.
Yeah.
I simply just don't trust Anthony Richardson, and it's like I said, I've done my old man on the porch rant, and I've contained my anger from that part of it. But what he's going to have to play a lot more football and a lot more consistent football before I see him as anything more than a sprint runner now. Because for me, I'm like, great, you can have a good game, you can have a good game and a half. When are you going to get tired again? When are you going to want to break again? Because to me, right now, until he proves me wrong, it's gonna happen. And the Lions are the exact kind of team where Dan Quinn would exhaust him, and just make a game plan where you just like hit him every day, nudge him, make him upset, and
Campbell.
see if it makes him tired again. Yeah, see if we used to do that against Dan Marino back in the day. The angrier Dan Marino got, the more red in the face he got, the more times you could pick him off. So with this particular thing, this is where Anthony Richardson can show that he did learn. If he gets beat up and pushed around and stays in that game and does not give up on his team, he'll earn a bit back. I still think the Lions are going to win going away. I don't think it's going to be as close, where it's going to be back and forth for about 3 quarters, but it's going to be the Lions game. Anthony Richardson has a lot to prove to a lot of people.
Yeah, and there is one factor for that Lions 5th ranked rushing defense that is no longer there, and that's Alex Anzalone. He was the leading tackler on the team, and he is a great run defender, and he is out. He's going to be out 6 to 8 weeks with injury. And so that defense, all of a sudden, they're missing 2 of their cornerstone defenders in the box. You're down Anzalone, and you've been out Hutchinson for a while. Eventually, that will catch up to a team. The Lions are phenomenal with the next man up mentality, and you love the way that they're coached. They're still going to be really tough, but there is a window here for the Colts to at least do some damage here. So it'll be interesting to see how it pans out. If Richardson can have another consistent game, he could be fantasy viable.
That's a very good point.
Yeah, it does benefit like both teams that they're both going to be in a dome. So I wouldn't surprise it's going to be a high-scoring game potentially for both. The biggest so there's a lot of division games this weekend, like Titans, Texans, Vikings, Bears, Cowboys, Commanders, Patriots, Dolphins, but the big Broncos, Raiders, obviously. The biggest one is for sure the Cardinals at Seahawks. For basically for the division, but not for the division, but you would say like whoever shows up in this game and wants it more is probably going to win the NFC West. We talked about it a little bit the other day with me and Zach, but what do you think about the Cardinals Seahawks game?
Yeah, it's going to be a fun one. The Cardinals are coming off a bye week, and they had a couple of huge wins leading into that bye week, so they still have a lot of momentum. Kind of like Zach said earlier, the Cardinals, for a lot of folks, they're one of those teams you kind of have to go, what? And you have to refresh your mind that they are leading the division. They're statistically strong, and they're starting to peak at the right time, kind of like the Chargers.
Yeah.
So I do like the Cardinals to roll into Puget Sound and beat up on the Seahawks a little bit. But I also think it's going to be a smash game for Jackson Smith and Jigba. I think he's going to be really busy in the slot. I think that the Cardinals are going to try to prevent the big play. DK Metcalf over the top. I think Budda Baker is going to be kind of there as a safety valve to try to keep that big play in check and force Geno to hit second, third, fourth reads. And it's going to be a fun one to watch out there in the Pacific Northwest.
I agree. Yeah. In the last 4 games before the Cardinals went into their bye week, they kind of checked all the boxes that I look for in a team I need to take seriously. It's beat the teams that are really good and beat them even if it's tight. Beat the teams that have potential to be good and then stop the teams that aren't as good as you. And they go up against the Chargers 17-15. They pull out a 1-point win against the Dolphins. And then they just stop the Bears and the Jets in succession. So
Yep.
I am another huge surprise that the Cardinals should be taken seriously, but the Cardinals should be taken seriously. And that's dangerous. That's really dangerous because I'm excited that this game means as much as is. Because if you'd have told me at the beginning of the season I'd be excited for a late season Seahawks Cardinals game, I'd be wondering what year you were talking about. But this is, I can see the Cardinals offense really starting to feel themselves, like coming off a 2 weeks of being able to prep and watch and not bask, but kind of look at how good they really are and build on that. This is a dangerous team coming down the stretch, and another team like the Chargers, I would not want to touch with a 10-foot pole in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
In terms of the other divisional games, is there another one, Cody, that has a little bit of intrigue in terms of like playoff stakes, or yeah, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of them that pops off a little bit for me, and that's just kind of because uh, of what's happened recently, is the Texans Titans game. So they're not,
Okay.
obviously competitive, but it is a division game, and
Yeah.
the Texans are kind of in a position where, all right, they're going to run away with that division unless the Colts can pull off a win this week and start chipping away at that 2-game lead that they have. So the Texans, they're looking at competing with the top teams in the AFC just for seeding, right? So that we're talking, the Steelers, the Chargers, and things of that nature. So in this one, I think that the Texans are going to pour it on the Titans as best they can, and the Titans have a solid defense. They're still the
Yeah.
number one passing defense in the league. But the good thing that the Titans do on that defense is they take away the number one option. So last week we were at the game in Nashville, and we watched the Tennessee Titans keep Justin Jefferson pretty much in check. I think he had 81 yards on 8 catches, something like that. But they kept him out of the end zone, but they kind of forgot about Jordan Addison, and he got loose on a couple plays. One of them was a 47-yard catch and run, and it kind of like they are susceptible to the big play. So I think this is going to be a week where the Texans kind of say, hey, we're here, we're for real, and there's going to be some fantasy production to be had there.
Yeah, I'm actually going to the game in MetLife with Tommy Cutlets against the Bucks team, who's probably getting Mike Evans. So yeah, that should be a fun one to watch. But yeah, Zach, in terms of another potential game that has some stakes, I guess, what are your thoughts on potentially the Patriots Dolphins game? The Patriots have kind of looked a little bit spicy over the last few weeks with Drake May, and the Dolphins are basically in win now mode if they want any chance at the playoffs. Do you think the Pats could squeak this one out?
I think with this year's Dolphins, anything's possible. I like I
Okay.
said, there's a lot of really heartfelt denial going on in South Florida that this season isn't over. But I don't see this one, weirdly enough, as intriguing as I see the Raiders and Broncos. That one really,
Okay.
really sticks out to me. I really like that one because I think the Broncos are starting to realize what they have in Bo Nix, which surprised me. I did not expect Bo
Yeah.
Nix to be Bo Nix has been this year. And I think the Broncos want to drag the Raiders back down into the fight for a wild card and stop them from thinking about a battle for the division. I genuinely believe that that's what this game is going to be about. And I trust that. I really do, because I think the Broncos know that they're way too out of position for a wild card for the division. But if they can beat the Raiders, they can make that a really good dogfight for one of the lower wild card spots. So that this game is going to
Yeah.
be a fight. Like Two teams really wanted to leave it on. It might as well be a playoff game for both of these teams.
I love that you brought that up, Zach, because I didn't want to go homer with my pick, but if the Raiders are kind of like in next season mode, tank mode, if you want to call it that, if they win one more game this season, it will be this one. And that's just because the rivalry between the Raiders and the Broncos is so bitter. It's bigger than the Chiefs rivalry. It's bigger than the Chargers rivalry. So if there is one game left that the Raiders have to just pull out all the stops and get a big dub this weekend and then continue on tanking for the Shedeur Sanders sweepstakes, then it could happen. So you never know in these division games. That stadium in Vegas, unfortunately, is probably going to be 70% Broncos fans. So it's going to be a hostile environment, even at home. And it's going to be a fun one to keep an eye on for sure.
Yeah. Let's go to the positional ranking for fantasy. There's a lot of potential. Speaking on Bo Nix, he's actually a potential top 10 QB for fantasy, like moving forward, just because of his production through the air and on the ground. In terms of, I know why Jaden Daniels is ranked third against the Cowboys defense. That's been pretty bad, but actually, like the past few weeks, like probably because of the rib injury, he's been not running as much, and that's kind of hurt his fantasy ceiling. He's been pretty consistent, like getting close to 20 each week, but in terms of like the ceiling play, like I would probably rank Herbert, potentially Kyler ahead of Jane Daniels. Like, Cody, what are your thoughts on like the QB this week?
Yeah, I mean Herbert, he's got to be climbing the ranks. It's good to see him at number 4 this week. So I like that. One thing that sort of has me scratching my head just a little bit sometimes is how routinely we see Jalen Hurts ranked as the number 1 overall quarterback. It seems like every other week, every couple of weeks, he's up there. But I mean, it's probably just his touchdown floor, I guess. The brotherly shoves at the goal line and such.
Yeah.
But it just seems like this Eagles team is starting to just kind of have me concerned a little bit because they're starting to look like a little bit of what happened last year in the passing game. The defense is looking good. They're not falling apart like they did last year, and the running game last year was pretty abysmal. But just the connection that I see between Jalen Hurts and his pass catchers, it just looks weird. It looks a little rickety, and it's just kind of like not inspiring me much as a fantasy player to trust his receivers and things of that nature. So I would probably downgrade Jalen Hurts a little bit. It is a tasty matchup this week. But a big start that I think people want to think about is Matthew Stafford. Why is he ranked 17? He has 2 of the best weapons to throw a football to that play in the NFL right now in Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. So, I mean, even if it's just like, oh, okay, well, he doesn't do much with his legs on the ground, it doesn't really matter because in the past 3 weeks, they've had a couple of tough games, couple of tough matchups. But Matthew Stafford, he just hangs tough in the pocket. He passes the eyeball test. And he's still, over the last 3 weeks, he's number 13 quarterback in PPR scoring. So, I mean, if he's averaging, 18 and a half fantasy points a game with 6 teams on a bye week this week, you can't tell me that there is 12 better quarterbacks to start ahead of Matthew Stafford. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Plus, to say that Matthew Stafford is only 2 slots better than Russell Wilson for this week, that alone is just. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love me my black and gold, but that is illogical to say the very least.
Yeah, like I would potentially downgrade like Jordan Love if that game turns into a fun snow game. Also, it is kind of weird to see Patrick Mahomes against the Panthers, like, and he's still not ranked as a top 5 QB. Like that's kind of shown like how like different the Chiefs team is for fantasy compared to previous years. I would say like Goff is pretty stable, but I would downgrade potentially like Purdy as well.
Mm-hmm.
Cody, for Anthony Richardson, like do you think like a 20-point ceiling is like could be consistent like moving forward after what he showed against the Jets?
Oof. I mean, Anthony Richardson, to say he has a 20-point ceiling, that's not high enough for his ceiling. His floor is scary.
Yeah.
He's
I meant, yeah,
Oh, okay. But yeah, I don't know. Like the more that this week goes on, and the more I'm kind of looking at this matchup, and the Colts are getting scrappy. Like they're not out of it to win that division, against the Texans. So I mean, I do like the play this week. I just think the Lions, what do? They put up points, they stop the run, and
Mhm.
they force people to throw the football. And if Anthony Richardson can have a full stable of his pass catchers and Downs and Pittman's going to play, and Pierce and all these guys, like that could get a little bit interesting on turf with these guys running around playing chuck and duck. So I do like Anthony Richardson ranked at 12, and it wouldn't surprise me if he cracked the top 10 this week.
I
Yeah.
agree. I think that there's two games that to me make up the top four most dangerous, and that's you got Lamar Jackson, you got Goff, and then we have the game we were just talking about, and those four right there to me should be the most dangerous matchups because there's going to be a lot of points put up. And Anthony Richardson, as much as I want him to prove me wrong, I think even if he doesn't fully, he's going to put up fantasy points. He's Anthony Richardson, so.
Yeah, he does have the opportunity to say the least. Yeah, moving on to running back, we have Saquon, Joe Mixon, Achan. Yeah, Cody, you can talk about some of the running backs.
Yeah, running backs, man. It was funny. Last night I was hanging out with a buddy, and he said, "Have you realized that this is one of the first years? I mean, that I can remember ever really where the running back position has had so few injuries. I mean, aside from the big one,
Yeah,
the scandal to start the season with CMC having tendonitis that nobody knew about, there really hasn't been any major running back injuries. Like it's just been haymaker after haymaker on wide receivers. So, I mean, just the fact that we still have some of the top dudes ranked in the top 10 with 6 teams on a bye. I mean, running back this week is pretty chalk. And if you have one of these guys in the top 10, you got to be feeling pretty good. One of my starts of the week, and he's climbed up in the rankings, I think, since I wrote my article, but it's Brian Robinson Jr., man, going against
oh
that
yeah,
Cowboys run defense. That is going to be brutal because Brian Robinson last played a football game. It'll be 10 days because they played on Thursday night, right? And so
hmm
they have that little mini bye week for him to just have that little bit of extra rest for his hamstring. And he is going to come into this game running angry. And that Washington Commanders football team is going to try to establish that run early and often. And it is going to be a heyday for that man and Austin Eckler for that matter. So if you got rushers for the Washington football Commanders, man, get them out there, get them in your lineups.
yeah. I've kind of noticed that even with like when Brian Robinson was out, with Rodriguez and Jeremy McNichols, like they just want to run the football. Like that's just
Mm-hmm.
to preserve potentially Jane Daniels and his health, so he can run when he needs to, but not necessarily throw his body out there, um, like he was kind of doing before. But interesting, uh, how Tyrone do against the Bucks. They are weaker in the secondary, but they've been very committed to giving him the rock over Singletary, and with Tommy DeVito, it's going to be interesting, like how they want to approach that situation. But yeah, in fact, what do you think of you know? Do you think that the Giants are going to be more pass heavy, or could they rely on the run even more now that Daniel Jones is the starter?
I know what they should do. But that has very little effect on what the Giants will do. If you have this kind of quarterback upheaval where I don't know if you guys saw Daniel Jones' press conference today, but it might as well
Yeah.
have been his goodbye to New York.
Oh yeah,
If
it
you,
was.
it's a mess at quarterback, and what that means is you hand every running back, running back, and then let chicken cutlets just do a little bit. But it should be an all running back situation, which means that running backs will not be a big part of the game plan, and they are going to do everything to reward the fans that bought tickets just to see cutlets. So that's what I feel is going to happen, because the Giants know that they have no right winning any more games this year, but they still want to make money off of it, and the best way to do that is give the fans what they came to see, and they don't have Barkley to do that anymore. So who do they have? They have Tommy.
Yeah. Actually, going to tonight. What do you think about Jalen Warren and like his usage? Coming off of the injury, like it.
I would
For
have him
not
much
yeah.
higher. Much
Okay.
higher, because you're not going to get a lot of downfield stuff. Najee Harris proved last week he's not a check down guy consistently. He said that he looked downfield way before he caught that football. He's not that. Jalen Warren is going to be that guy in the passing game. Expect him. I wouldn't be surprised if he had a multi-touchdown game.
Really?
So this particular game, because of what Najee Harris is going to be asked to do when Jalen Warren comes in, this is a really, really rocky pass defense. And Jalen Warren is a really, really good pass catching running back. And now that he's healthy, he's shifty. So I really, really like that. So I'm not talking like, 35-yard touchdowns, but I do think a receiving and rushing from Jalen isn't completely out of the question.
So
But
tonight, do
he
you
should be
think
ranked higher
that,
for this one.
despite the weather tonight, do you think that the Steelers will utilize a kind of like a short passing / screen game as an extension of the run game to try to get Jalen Warren going?
Absolutely. And what I'm hoping for is we've had a lot of really good play calls with the wrong player on the receiving end of it. And I want that corrected. So we've had really good screens, but the wrong people in there. So like we've done toss plays to Najee when it should be to Warren, and we've done really long bombs to Austin when it should be to Pickens, and specific things like that. So I love the idea of what you're saying, but it depends on if we see the Arthur Smith that can get those two to work together, or if he just keeps calling the right play without really knowing who's going to be on the end of it. So, because this is a
That's
perfect time to
hilarious.
pull out those kind of things.
I've always thought that Arthur Smith, like, you know how when coaches are researching for their matchups and they look for trends, right? Like trends and play
Yeah.
calls, whatever teams like tend to do and trend on doing in certain situations, and you call plays that called trend breakers. And so I think Arthur Smith just calls trend breaking plays for the sake of calling trend breaking plays. It doesn't matter who the ball's going to, who it should go to. I swear, he just wants to break trends just to prove he can, and it doesn't really help the offense.
Yeah, I've seen a
like
couple of those.
Yeah, like I wouldn't be surprised. I've heard this said about like for DFS purposes, but Drake May might have a boom game and gonna break the slate at quarterback because he's rushing like a decent amount. I feel the same way about like Jalen Moore. I feel like there's going to be a game where he's just going to pop off randomly for like a touchdown or two. Because I kind of saw that at the end of the Ravens game. Like he was just catching all these dump off screens, from Russ. Like it could happen pretty soon. But yeah, going to receivers. They have Pickens ranked 14th. Even with the weather, like I still think like he's still their go-to guy, so he shouldn't drop down too far. But yeah, Cody, what do you think about the receivers this week?
Man, I need you guys' help because something on this list doesn't make any sense to me at all. Okay. And I mean, big name aside, why is Malik Neighbors ranked number 9 in wide receivers? Yeah, okay, I know he's been suffering through the Daniel Jones experiment for his entire career up to this point, but you can't tell me that the mere switch from Danny Dimes to Tommy Cutlets is gonna like slingshot his production that far. I mean, Tommy hasn't played a down all season, I don't think, and it's just like I don't understand why he's ranked that high because right now, Malik Neighbors in the last 3 weeks is wide receiver 32 in fantasy. That's not even a flex play or a wide receiver 3 in 10-team leagues. He's averaging 13.3 fantasy points per game, and you're going to put him as a wide receiver 1 this week? I don't get it.
No, that makes no sense. Look who's above, right? I mean, Metcalf, Lamb, Flowers, Pickens. Especially this particular week, that does not make any. I don't. That has to be like a Pro Bowl kind of thing, like just based on the name, and they didn't check anything else.
Yeah, that was the one that just absolutely jumped off the page to me.
Wow. Because I understand the George Pickens. I think George Pickens' ceiling for tonight, for anybody who bets on anything or does anything like that, 65 yards, I feel, is the 100-yard game on a curve, considering the snow and sleet. So 65 yards receiving is a 100-yard game tonight. That's how you have to see it.
Wow.
So it's ugly game. It's an under game as far as I call it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Like I think like I'm surprised like I know Mike Evans is coming off of his hamstring, but you know, we've seen all these like targets for the Bucks receivers when he was out. And I think now with Evans back, like all of those are just gonna go to Evans and Otten, and they're just gonna end the running backs like, you know, as fun as, you know, the Sterling Shepherds, and who else? Like Raheem Jarrett and Trey Palmer. Like I think that, you know, Mike Evans should get back to wide receiver 1 form. Who else? I have a very interesting decision potentially. You know, I have all 3 of these receivers right here: Flowers, McConkey, Pickens. But then I also have, you know, Calvin Ridley in the back burner. I know he had a down game last week, but I am very tempted to start really over one of those guys. Just because, you know, if the Titans want to beat the Texans, they're going to want to throw the ball for sure.
That's actually why I don't know if I would trust him this particular week, because my brother-in-law is a diehard Texans fan. Like since the franchise began, suffered through all that Texans fan, and there are few teams he hates more than the Tennessee Titans, and there are a few teams the Texans hate more. It's like to a Steelers Ravens extent. Like a lot outside of Houston, a lot of people might not understand that, but that is there is real, not just like hatred between those teams. If you go back, you watch Andre Johnson like try to rip the head off of some of those defenders. So I do not think the Texans are going to stand for the Titans beating them.
Yeah, Cody, what do you think about that dilemma that I have right now?
You were thinking about starting Nico? Is that what is that what it was?
Oh no, starting Calvin Ridley over one of these 3 right here: Flowers, McConkey, Pickens.
I mean, maybe just based on, you know, what you've heard Zach talk about tonight with the weather and the usage for Pickens, but his big play potential is still too significant. For me, I almost had Ridley as one of my fades of the week, as one of my fallers.
Oh, interesting.
And it's basically just because, like, after watching him play last week, like Will Levis, he's kind of a little bit like Russell Wilson. He's a little bit of a one-trick pony. He's got a nice deep ball, and he's not looking for Calvin Ridley on a lot of these deep balls. He's looking for Westbrook Akine. And it was pretty hilarious that I got to witness the longest passing play in the NFL last week and a 99-yard touchdown from Will Levis to Nick Westbrook-Akine. So I don't know. I think that Texans secondary is really starting to gel and kind of come around. So I don't know. I wouldn't start Ridley if it was me over any of those three.
Yeah. Going on to with likely coming back from injury, we saw him taking away from Andrew Snap. So, I don't think he got a touchdown last week. So yeah, the touchdown equity wasn't there. So he kind of fell off the wayside a little bit. But we saw John Smith and Will Disley come on as top 10 tight ends. Cody, what do you think about the tight end position this week?
Oh man, I know sometimes I have a short memory, but hopefully you guys remember when I called Will Disley last week, right? Did you remember? I love to see it, man. I love it. He bailed me out at my tight end. I had Trey McBride on a bye last week, and I was fortunate enough to be able to pluck Disley in a 14-team league, so I felt pretty good about that. So moving forward, I mean, he's got another great matchup. So seeing him in the top 10 is kind of cool, but it's also a little bit scary. But there's been so much volatility at the tight end position this year that why not? Will Disley ranked number 7, absolutely ahead of TJ Hawkinson. Yeah, give me more of that. So I just want to know why Brock Bowers isn't tight end 1. Just tell me why. Like the Chiefs are not going to have to throw. The Chiefs are not going to have to throw the ball to beat the Carolina Panthers. This is going to be a heavy dose of Kareem Hunt and maybe a little bit of Isaiah Pacheco. But Brock Bowers, he's breaking records. He's the only pass catching weapon that the Raiders reliably have, and the Broncos, they'll give up points to tight ends. So it's Brock Bowers versus Broncos linebackers and safeties. I mean, how is he not number 1?
Well, there's only one reason why he's not number 1, and that's because his name isn't Travis Kelce.
Yeah, you're right, and he's not dating.
That is legit. That's legitimately the only, because at certain points, when you look at a name, you kind of shrug and say, well, it's blank. And so you put him in. It's kind of like, Peyton Manning at certain point, LaDainian Tomlinson. You see Travis Kelce, start Travis Kelce, even if it's not a deserving season of that. So I agree Brock Bowers should be there. But we'll talk in 10 years. We'll probably be talking about, well, why is Brock Bowers number 1 still? It'll be a cycle.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. Real quick before we move on, Zach, I was wondering. I have David Njoku starting tonight. I have way too much stock into this game tonight as a Ravens fan.
You really do.
But it's just in the bye weeks, and so whatever. But yeah, for the Browns, going into Steelers, like how do you think they're gonna, cover their assortment of weapons, including the tight end Njoku this week? Well, tonight actually.
Njoku has always frustrated me. He's one of those players.
Okay,
there's certain players that have just got under my skin. Hushmanzada from the Bengals was one that always managed to get the better of the Steelers. And Njoku I came in last week trusting the Steelers to be able to take care of Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely as a duo. I am more worried about Njoku by himself, just based on track record of how the Steelers play against him. I can't explain it. It's like a gut feeling. So I like this start. This guy's a Steeler fan. Whoever put this together very clearly, because he's aware of what Njoku can do. Especially in games where he's not supposed to be effective, in games where the Browns are not supposed to be effective. Usually the Browns will lose like the 31-10, and Njoku will have 200 receiving yards. So weird things like that happen.
Would it be shocking to you guys if Jameis Winston threw 3 touchdowns tonight and they were all 3 to David Njoku? Like in short situations, like goal line, like it's just like Can you imagine a 3-touchdown game from Njoku?
Well, I just felt a bit of bile, but uh, yeah, I can see that happening. Certainly hope it doesn't, but my goodness, thank you for taking away a little bit of that confidence that I had. Goodness gracious. Yeah, no, and Njoku, he's an one of those X factors that yeah, start him if you have him.
Yeah. Going to kickers, like I definitely agree with the top list. You know, we have the Lions game winning game saver Jake Bates. I actually heard an interesting thing where he actually he can kick long kicks, but he gets them like barely, like it just crosses the plane or whatever, and then even like a 30-yarder, like he'll just barely get it in there, and you're like, oh, like that's kind of interesting take on that. But yeah, I would just definitely target offenses that are in a dome that are indoors this week with all the weather going on. But I think Chris Boswell can still have a solid floor.
There
Like,
we go. Thank you.
yeah, I think the Steelers are very good at putting him in situations where he doesn't have to like make the super long ones to like have a good fantasy day. Like he can still get away with like 2 or 3 like 30-40 yarders.
Actually, I'd like to thank Mark Caboli because he had I love Mark Caboli's work in general, and I love his writing. But this particular week, he wrote an entire piece on Chris Boswell, and I don't know the last time like an entire piece was written on a kicker, and he changed everything about his approach to kicking coming into this season. He approached the time he doesn't kick for 48 hours prior to a game, which was impossible before. He literally has his own practice schedule that Mike Tomlin just kind of it's a treated fairly, not the same kind of thing. This particular,
Yeah.
I'm normally not particular about this, but this year, Chris Boswell deserves more respect than he's getting right here. Because I understand it's outdoors and all that, but Chris Boswell has more points in the NFL than anyone. Anyone.
Yeah.
Like anyone.
If there's any kicker in the entire league that knows what it's like to kick in the wind and the rain and the bad weather, dude, it is Chris Boswell at his home stadium, right? Like, do you think a little bit of wind is gonna phase this dude? No.
Oh no, he's excited about this. It's the way that defense gets, kind of up for the. Chris Boswell is excited for this, and weirdly enough, from what I read about him in that piece, he is the definition of I don't care what happened before, I don't care what this kick means, I don't care what time of the day it is, I don't care. I'm going to go out there, I'm going to kick the ball, and I'm going to go sit down. And literally, that's the confidence in this man is. He's worth every single penny. So,
100%.
Chris, ignore this ranking right here because this one was made differently than the tight ends guy because this one isn't a Steeler fan. Random people making the different rankings this week, apparently.
Yeah.
So, Andrew, I gotta ask you, man. Like, why is Justin Tucker ranked number 5 at this point?
I don't know. The only reason I can think of is that in a primetime spot, like I wouldn't be surprised for a bounce back, but at the same time, like it's tough, like to roll out like a kicker who's missed like a lot of field goals, like kind of like Jake Elliott. They're just tied to the offense, so that's the only thing I can think of. But yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, looking at the kicker list here, I mean, there's a lot of teams on bye. There's some good kickers on bye this week. So if you're looking for a deep dive at kicker, there's one name that stands out to me at the bottom of this list, and it's Joshua Carty. He's kicking at home. He's kicking indoors. He plays on a football team that has a quite prolific offense. And I think, this game is going to be high scoring. I think he's going to get his chances to boot field goals and extra points. So Joshua Carty is a dude that can get you over 10 points, 12 points from your kicker this week, man. I don't understand why he's ranked 19.
Yeah, and even against like a tough Philly defense, like that should actually play into the favor of kicking field goals because they're going to want to keep pace with the Eagles. most likely. But
Absolutely.
yeah, going for the defense. We have their normal staple. Yeah, going for defense, we have their normal staple of like Denver, Minnesota, Tampa, Commanders, Lions, and Steelers. Cody, what's the defense you're trotting out there this week?
Yeah, I mean, I'll keep rolling with my boys here. I'm glad to see him kind of up there at number 7 this week as the Washington Commanders. They're potentially going to see a large dose of Trey Lance this game. Mike McCarthy was recently saying how he felt bad that he didn't put Trey Lance in the fourth quarter of their blowout loss last week, and so he's schemed up some packages for him. So I mean, Cooper Rush, Trey Lance, who just hasn't played, and a Commanders defense that is pissed off. They've lost 2 close games in a row, and they are treading playoff water right now. And this is going to be a bloodbath. So I like the Washington Commanders to have turnovers this week and turnovers for points this week.
Yeah. Zach, how many points are the Steelers defense going to have tonight?
This is it. The Steelers do very. I don't know if anyone. I think it was a Monday Night Football game last year. The Steelers played against Cleveland, where the defense pretty much won the game for them. This particular game is where my eyebrow-raising drafting positions of the Steelers defense in my fantasy drafts are prove that it was worth it, because there were several times where I could just feel people raising their eyebrows where I picked them. I'm like, nah, I know what I'm doing. And games like this, so games like this is where it really matters. So I love that the Texans are that high too, but Cody, how do you feel about the Texans being number 2 on this?
Oh man, I love it. It's just there's just something different about getting to see people play football in person, right? And like Will Levis, he is not a good quarterback. I'm sorry, man. It's just like, yeah, he's good enough to make an NFL team, I guess. But like Will Levis is not good at football. He makes poor decisions. He gets happy feet when he shouldn't. He takes sacks tremendously. And the Houston Texans can get after the quarterback. They have a very aggressive defensive minded head coach. And I mean, last week, the Houston Texans defense scored massive fantasy points against the Dallas Cowboys. So it's probably a lesser opponent on a less powerful offense this week. So I'm rolling the Texans in a couple leagues this week. I love it.
I like that. I feel like Minnesota Vikings should be higher against that Chicago offense. I understand the Chicago offense is quote unquote getting better, but under 8 points for that kind of a defense this week now. I'm thinking higher than that. I can see them having double digits against that.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. Minnesota is for real, and they were playing the Titans last week, and we saw them just completely shut down their offense except for one play. I mean, Tony Pollard. I mean, I haven't even checked the stats, but I'm not sure he broke 20 yards rushing last week. I mean, they're absolute monsters, and they're another team that has a hyper aggressive defensive coordinator in Brian Flores, who just absolutely embodies the personnel that they have. And against this offense that might be down DeAndre Swift with a groin injury, and their offensive line has struggled all season long, yeah, they probably should be ranked higher.
I agree with that. The Vikings take. But yeah, any final thoughts for defense?
I think the Cardinals defense coming off a bye is mildly interesting. If you don't have one of the top 10 defenses and you need to take a flyer on one, why not the Cardinals defense? And it's special teams as well. It's not just defense, right? So the Cardinals are one of the teams, kind of like the Washington Commanders, that like to run kickoffs out of the end zone. In fact, I think the Cardinals have one of, if not the only kickoff return for a touchdown on the season. So that's a team, hey, if Geno, if he's not dialed in and he's trying to force balls to DK Metcalf over the top, and Budda Baker, has a pick 6 in this game, I'm not going to be shocked at all. So if you got to take a flyer on a defense, man, paint that Cardinals D coming out of a bye, and they play hard.
Yeah. Also,
sure. Yeah.
You can go ahead.
My last. Oh yeah, my last thought on defense is an interesting X factor that I picked up that might help you determine how good that defense is the number one defense right now, the Pittsburgh Steelers. I don't know if it's all the time, but majority of the time, if that offense gets a pick or the defense takes it away, they hand it to the defensive coaches. They hand it to the defensive linebackers coach. If it's Peyton Wilson handed it right to the linebackers coach, the defensive backs are handing it to the defensive backs coach. There's a certain bond between the position coaches and the positional units in Pittsburgh that is having a major effect, because a lot of times the holding and keeping that turnover means something to those players. And if they are handing it away to the people who they are crediting for doing that. So that could be an X factor. Watching the sideline after turnovers, who do those players give the ball to? And that will help you know if that's a top defense.
Damn,
Yeah.
that's interesting.
Also,
That's cool.
yeah. Also for defense, like if that Packers game gets some snow up there against the Niners, like, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if, like, you know, the Niners have kind of like a rough game in terms of offensive output. But yeah, that's gonna do it for Total Epic Sports at the 4th and goal. You can plug your social, Cody.
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Cody from Montana, and my wife and I are on all social medias at Gypsy Hustle. Give us a follow if you want to laugh.
Yeah. Zach.
Yep, Francisca Zach, right down there. I'm on all over the place. I'm just recently moved over to the Blue Sky, so moving up big on there too. And I also do another podcast. I'm a co-host for Steeler Sanctuary, and we are all over the place. So check us out. And we're gonna have Cody on soon when I can figure that shit out.
Yeah. Well, that'll do it for the 4th and goal. Hopefully we have a good week 12, and I mean, I would say good luck to the Steelers, but I kind of need the Browns to win for the standings.